Hello and welcome to the World News on Voice of the People TV. I am Jerry Alpeyoy. And now to the news. Claudia Sheinbaum was sworn in as Mexico's first woman president on Tuesday, vowing to bolster women's rights and ensure Latin America's number two economy remains a secure destination for international investment. Sheinbaum, a 62-year-old scientist and former mayor of Mexico City, took the oath of office and received the presidential sash in a boisterous ceremony in Mexico's Congress, which marks the start of her six-year term. Sheinbaum also used her first speech as head of state to address investor concerns after the passing of a sweeping judicial reform pushed by her predecessor, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador. She reiterated that the central bank would be autonomous and told investors that the investments of national and foreign shareholders will be safe in the country. Alberto Ramos, head of Goldman Sachs Latin American Economic Research, said Sheinbaum will be judged on whether she can construct a predictable and investment-friendly policy and regulatory framework. South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol held his first telephone call with Japan's new Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba today and agreed a united response together with the United States is needed to counter North Korea's threats, his office said. South Korea last week welcomed Ishiba's election as the head of Japan's ruling party, saying it looked forward to the two countries continuing to improve ties and working together on security and economic issues under his leadership. Yoon told Ishiba during their call the neighbors are important partners who share values and interests and invited him to continue to communicate closely and enhance cooperation, Yoon's office said. Ishiba, who was confirmed as prime minister yesterday, pledged to seek deeper ties with friendly nations to counter the gravest security threats his country has faced since World War II. Yoon, who has made it a diplomatic priority to improve ties with Tokyo and build a trilateral security cooperation together with the United States by putting years of animosity stemming from Japan's wartime history behind. Ishiba's predecessor, Fumio Kishida, and Yoon oversaw a newfound partnership after orchestrating an about-face in ties that had sunk to their lowest level in decades before Yoon came to office, rooted by U.S. President Joe Biden. Georgian President Salome Zurabishvili has refused to sign into law a bill approved by Parliament last month that rights groups and many opposition politicians say drastically curbs the rights of the country's LGBT community. The so-called Family Values Bill was pushed through Parliament by the ruling Georgian Dream Party on September 17 in an 84-0 vote, which was boycotted by the opposition while rallies were being held by protesters outside the Parliament building. In line with the provisions of the Georgian constitution, Zurabishvili refused to endorse the bill and returned it to Parliament without written comments. The presidential administration confirmed it today. The move highlights the dramatically polarized political landscape in the Caucasus nation ahead of national elections in October. Parliament Speaker Shava Papashvili, a co-sponsor of the bill and member of the Georgian Dream, is now expected to sign the bill into law and publish it within 5 days. The package of legal changes, whose complete title is on family values and protection of minors, brings changes to 18 current laws, including legislation on free speech and expression, as well as broadcasting. Still in Asia, where Taiwan shut down schools and closed its financial markets on Wednesday as Typhoon Kraton pounded its south and east with torrential rains and winds ahead of its expected landfall. The Central Weather Administration said Kraton, packing sustained wind speeds of 162 km per hour and gusts of up to 198 kilometers per hour, with 120 kilometers southwest of the major port city Kaohsiung as of 3 p.m. The typhoon, downgraded overnight to mediums from strong under Taiwan's measurement system, is now expected to arrive at Kaohsiung or Tainan on Thursday morning and a day later than previously forecast. Offices and schools across the island were closed, and the Interior Ministry said around 10,000 people had been evacuated from vulnerable areas as a precaution. Premier Cho Jong-tai urged the public to stay at home during the typhoon and remain vigilant. All domestic flight and ferry services were cancelled today, and around 250 international flights were suspended. At least 40 Palestinians were killed in an Israeli army raid early today in the southern Gaza Strip. A medical source in the Gaza European hospital told newsmen that 32 killed Palestinians were brought to the hospital as a result of the Israeli shelling on Palestinians' homes in areas in the eastern part of the city of Khan Yunis. Another medical source at the Nassau Medical Complex told Anadolu that 8 victims had been recovered from under the rubble of homes that were hit. The source added that rescue efforts continued for others who are still missing. Eyewitness told newsmen that the Israeli army carried out a sudden dawn incursion into eastern Khan Yunis, opening direct firing at Palestinian homes. Israeli forces prevented rescue teams and ambulances from reaching the struck homes. Trees have since traded threats as allies and onlookers, including the United Kingdom, called for a step back amid fears of regional war breaking out. We'll now go on a break now and return with more with Mr. Dele Fanimo, a seasoned journalist, social political analyst, to help discuss stories from Ukraine and Israel. Do stay with us. Glad to have you back, and definitely we'll have to welcome and say thanks for joining us this afternoon, Mr. Dele Fanimo.
Yeah, too. And good afternoon to you,
Hi.
Jerry.
All right.
After a long while.
Great to have you join us. All right, let's go to the main conversation where we started with Russia's army, which has taken full control of the strategic hilltop town of Voleda in eastern Ukraine. Ukraine's military confirmed today that it was withdrawn troops from the frontline town, which occupies a key location in the Donetsk region to protect the military personnel and equipment. As a result of the enemy's actions, there arose a threat of encircling the city, said the military's Kostysia ground forces formation in a statement posted on Telegram. The withdrawal comes a day after the governor of Donetsk, one of the 4 Ukrainian regions Russia annexed in 2022, despite not being in full control of its territory, reported that Russian troops had reached the center of Voleda. Located on strategic high ground, the town has resisted capture since Russia launched its full-scale invasion in 2022. A supply hub for both sides in the war, the town is located at the intersection of the eastern and southern front. Its capture has long been seen by Moscow as offering a major step towards incorporating the entire Donetsk region. Voleda's strategic importance is further heightened by its proximity to a rail line connecting Crimea, the Black Sea Peninsula, annexed by Russia in 2014, to the industrial Donbas region, which comprises Donetsk and Luhansk regions, most of which Moscow now controls. And over to Mr. Dele Fanimo. What are the strategic implications of Russia's control over this region, which is very important, and how might this shift the balance in the eastern and southern front of the war in Ukraine?
You see, just like Israel, Russia is trying to ensure that its territorial integrity is secured. NATO, Russia is not part of NATO. And as a matter of fact, Putin needs to ensure that there is no opportunity for NATO to mass around Ukraine. Because it's just like you have foreign troops and Amanda in the Republic of Benin. Of course, it doesn't take time for them to have an incursion to Nigeria if there's going to be an attack. And that's what Russia is pushing back. That, look, you can't have your military base close to my country. And as a result, it became a war. Ukraine deliberately went into alliance with some other nations, and he was also angling to become a member of NATO. And so in that region, don't forget that these countries were part of the USSR before the disintegration. And so they still feel that some of these smaller emerged nations should be part of the ideals and ideology of the USSR that came, that was balkanized. So for Putin, he knows he has the enemies, particularly in the West, to contend with. And over the years, even when there was this Cold War between America and Russia, Russia was really, really preparing that they don't want to go under in case there's a strike, a surprise one for that matter, from America. And over the years, they have built armament. In fact, the Russians had made a kind of balancing of force. Otherwise, if not for Russia and China that is coming on strong, North Korea that is also coming on strong, America would have continued to be the police of the world. So, for economic reasons, Russia needs to put everything in place to secure Russia. And for diplomatic reasons too, because there are some nations that look up to Russia for protection. And there are some nations too that look up to America for protection. Look at what is happening in Israel. America has not pretended not to be part of the war going on in Lebanon, the Gaza Strip, and he has not pretended to be an ally of Israel in this war. So Russia needs to show that force, to push back. And that's what they are doing, to ensure that they don't allow any incursion into their country using the flanks of Ukraine. And that's why they are pushing back. It is not for nothing that they are angling at Vuleda. Vuleda is just like if anybody is planning to decimate, God forbid, Nigeria today, the target is not likely to be Abuja. The target is likely to be Lagos. Because that's where you have the economic base. That's where you have even some control of the military. You have the Navy here, you have the Air Force here, you have the Army here, and particularly the Navy, because you don't have the presence of the Navy in some areas, like in the north, where they don't have large body of water. You understand? So they know that this particular part of Ukraine is strategic, and that's why they have gone. And in order not to have maximum collateral damage in terms of losses to humans, they decided to use ground troops. You know, these days,
People
Nations
rarely
rarely
use
use
ground
land
troops.
groups,
Yeah.
ground troops, because you have to have permitted your enemy with
Trainings and missiles.
battle, and then maybe you just move to to hem the country using the navy, and then lastly, these days, soldiers, ground troops are used to mop up after decimating the enemy. Just pockets of people, houses, you move in mortar, you move to shell, and then decimate further, and then clean the area up. So Russia is using that. The to human and material resources is not beyond what they expect, and it's not as if they don't have area armament to
Definitely.
tackle this place.
Definitely.
So, and already that place has fallen, and this is the second time. You understand? It has fallen to Russian troops. That's why they have to leave the place.
Yeah, talking about Ukrainians.
Ukrainian troops have to be withdrawn so that
Don't- don't-
the battle does not escalate. Already your enemy is in your territory. You need to manage that enemy so that the collateral damage will not be much. That's what they are pushing. Well, that's why they are pushing back.
Do you think this strategy shows that they have hands up that region to the Russian forces?
Well, one would expect that there will be strategy for them to launch back and recapture their territory that has been lost.
You think Ukraine has the capacity to do that?
Ukraine is not fighting this war alone.
Okay.
It has some allies. You remember that some money, some armaments were shipped from Europe, particularly France and some other countries in Europe, to support Ukraine. And Zelensky has visited some of these countries, even when his country is at war, to garner support and to also let them know the extent to which, when you are in war like that, you also need propaganda to ensure that people come to your side. People look at you as the victim so that you can get support. Support can come in terms of armament, in terms of supplies and all that. So that's what, but pushing back Russian troops from this region, to me, is a little bit difficult, the way I see it.
Can we say that Russia is beginning to have the advantage?
Well, if your enemy comes to your territory and annexes your territory, what would you call that? You would call that a disadvantage?
Definitely looks like an advantage. All right, moving on. Let's go back to the next on the agenda today, where it looks like Israel and Iran have issued threats of retaliation against one another, pushing long-standing concerns over escalation towards a regional war for new heights. And Israel, with backing from its United States ally, has promised to respond to the huge missile attack that Iran launched late on Tuesday. Iran has said any such retaliation will be met with an even tougher backlash. Meanwhile, Israel on Wednesday today resumed its attacks on Lebanon and announced it is sending additional troops to carry out the ground offensive that it launched on Tuesday. Iran said the close to 200 missiles it fired at Israel were a response to the recent killings of Hamas, Hezbollah, and Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps leader. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warned Tehran late on Tuesday that it had made a big mistake. U.S. President Joe Biden's administration has warned Iran of serious consequences. Meanwhile, U.S. Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson said the world needs America to return to a maximum pressure campaign against Iran. Also, Iran's armed forces joined Chief of Staff General Mohammad Bagheri, threatened to repeat its missile attack with multiplied intensity if Israel retaliates against Iran's territory. All right, Mr. Delefanimo, how close are Israel and Iran to a full-scale regional war, and what would be the immediate impact on the Middle East?
I predicted that.
Okay.
You see, these two wars, I mean, they call it crisis, they call it conflict. But when you have this huge number of deployment of armament, missiles, and all whatnot, then you know that it's not just a crisis. It's a full-blown war now. You know, a country now having incursion into another country territory. That means that other country is gradually losing its sovereignty, you know, to the war. And unfortunately, you recall that about 2 weeks ago, China fired its missile into the IC. It's a kind of warning, indirect warning, that look, I am standing by, and you know where China's interest is. You know, it's obviously not on the side of Israel. So, what we are saying is, I said it about a week ago when people were talking about ceasefire. I said, ceasefire cannot happen in that region. Because the day you see yourself as an underdog, that's the day you double your effort at securing yourself. Israel has always seen itself as a lone ranger in that territory, hemmed by Lebanon, Iran, Syria, Yemen, and all. So, and with a very small landmass compared to that. And the reason why this thing is escalating is that Gaza Strip, a tiny island. You understand? So, if care is not taken, if this escalates, I tell you, it's going to be a full-blown war. And I don't want to say it, but it's becoming obvious that we may have a third world war in our hands.
All right.
The way it is today.
All right, taking a look at the U.S., what role do they play in this conflict, given its support for Israel? And could this lead to broader international involvement? And some have said that Joe Biden didn't actually manage the situation. That's why it has escalated this way.
You see, there's a long-standing relationship between Israel and America. And most of those people that are holding strategic positions in the U.S. are Jews. You understand? And wherever you find yourself, you are still tied to your home country. If anything happens in America today, a Nigerian will first think Nigeria before thinking America. You know? And it is good for America to have Israel in that territory, because that's the only eye and side. I mean, the sight, the eyes that can watch that territory for America. And you also realize that America abhors terrorism, and this particular region, from Iran, Iraq, Yemen, that's why we have the largest preponderance of terrorist groups. And they needed to have access to this terrorist group to decimate them. You need to protect your territory from afar, not when enemies come knocking at your doorsteps. You understand? And Hamas. And who are the people behind this? And Hamas. And who are the people behind these groups? There are people in that region. Hezbollah's headquarters is in Lebanon.
Some have said that Israel have dealt with these nations before altogether, and with history favoring the Israelis, that this time around it looks like they are still on the higher ground in terms of dealing with this so-called enemies.
You see why Israel would always have upper hand. Israel has not let down its guard since 1948 that it came to that spot. Because Israel has recognized the fact that it is surrounded by enemies from all angles. And when you know that you are surrounded by enemies, you don't go back to sleep.
Or what happened at Gaza when they were attacked overnight and people were killed and some were kidnapped?
Do you know what happened? Israel wanted to honor the ceasefire that was proposed. And that would be the second time Israel will want to honor ceasefire agreements, and they get attacked. That's why I said last week that there is no way Israel will allow any ceasefire until, and that was what Netanyahu said later, that until we're on top of this game, nobody should come and talk about, because Netanyahu has been a veteran of wars in that territory, and he knows how people can ambush them to decimate them. You imagine if they were not prepared, 200 missiles, but they were ready for those missiles. That's why they were able to counter with anti-missiles. And that's why there was no devastation in Israel. So I always tell people, wars are not just planned a day and executed the next day. It's about long-term strategy. Israel has one thing going for them. Anybody that is above 18 in Israel is a soldier on reserve list. Yeah, what we are trying to replicate here is the NYC scheme.
Even in Egypt, most of the
Middle
East countries
yes.
have a 1-year military training. So even if you're playing football, you have
to go back and do that.
1-year service.
You see? And that's why anybody, if the troops are decimated in Israel today, they will just have to call those people, and because they are in reserve, they just come and put on the uniform and they know what to do because they have already been trained. And everybody has that mental idea that because of the training, the component of the training also included patriotism. So, an Israeli is ready to die for Israel. And so, if he's called upon to put on his uniform and is handed the rifle or is handed the mortar tank or any other weapon, it's good to go because he knows that he's fighting for his country. That patriotism, that zeal that drives the Israeli soldier. And so, there's no way they will let off their guard. And as long as they don't let off their guard and they keep improving and they have the support of a country as big, as strong as America, they cannot go under easily in that territory.
All right, looking ahead towards the election in November, some are saying that whatever happens in that election could determine where this war might go in terms of if it happens to be Kamala Harris, it might not look good.
I've always said one thing.
And if it's Donald Trump, that it might only get worse for Iran.
I've always said one thing. Kamala cannot win this election. I am telling you. You see, when you want to gauge the barometer of an election, you want to know where the pendulum swings, you first of all detach yourself from whatever emotion that is working around that election. On paper, with, this is a woman, first female American president, first this, first that. Yes, you want to give it to Kamala. But the language an average American, particularly the conservatives, the language they want to hear is what Trump is telling them. I want to take America back for Americans. And part of it is what they are doing in the Middle East now. A Trump would, when you see Trump, forget about all these shenanigans that are attributed to him. But this is a man that is fearless. He's ready to go the whole hog. When North Korean president was threatening, he said, for every nuke, that's nuclear button you have, I have 10. But I move about with my own nukes. That's the bag they carry behind the President of America. It contains all the nukes buttons. So from anywhere he is, he needs to just snap that back from that person and then just one button. And something will happen. So Trump is like that. And they need a president like Trump for other nations that may have an idea of trying to do anything against America. That, look, this man is a little bit on the left side, and you better be careful. But they still assume that, if Kamala becomes president, she's a woman, that milk of kindness may be flowing in her, and all that and all that. But the Trump, he doesn't care.
Some say Trump would have not been neutral with the way it looks like Biden has been in this whole Israel
Trump,
and Iran.
from what you say about Trump, does he look like somebody that pretends? In fact, he doesn't even use diplomatic language. He tells it straight. You attack us, we are going to retaliate. That's Trump. But somebody who feels comfortable using you see, some other time you might get reprisal attack. That's employing diplomatic language. But Trump will say, you are getting reprisal attack. And that's, if you look at the way Netanyahu talks, you know that it's like a prototype of Trump in Israel. Israel back from all this aggression around the country. So he doesn't mince words. If he goes to United Nations, he will say it the way it is. That look, we can't agree to ceasefire until we have decimated these people enough and incapacitated them to the extent that we know that they cannot rise up to a point that they want to attack again. It's like one of those 48 laws of power. He said, when you want to fight your enemy, go for total crush, so that he doesn't come back rejuvenated, re-energized to come and unleash terror on you. And that's what they are doing in that place, and with the full support of America.
All right, before we let you go, what next? What do you foresee between now and December?
In this conflict,
Yeah,
it's going to escalate. And if it escalates, and if Trump becomes president of America, it may snowball into full-blown regional war.
All right, I want to say many thanks, Mr. Delifano, for being a part of the World News.
It's my pleasure.
It's always a pleasure having you.
Thank you very much.
All right, up next is business, sport, and entertainment stories. Do stay tuned. All right, welcome back. You're still watching the World News on Voice of the People TV. And now to business. Brazilian digital bank PicPay plans to go public on the Nasdaq Stock Exchange in 2025. PicPay aims to hire financial firms to carry out the initial public offering. This will be the company's second attempt at listing in the U.S. after dropping plans in 2021 due to market headwinds. PicPay says 2025, I beg your pardon, as a promising year for the IPO, citing the Federal Reserve's rate cuts and the upcoming U.S. election. The company seeks international visibility and access to a larger pool of tech investors. Funds raised will help expand operations in Brazil. The U.S. National Labor Relations Board has accused Apple of violating employees' rights to organize and advocate for better working conditions. The complaint alleges Apple imposed unlawful confidentiality, non-disclosure, and non-compete agreements, as well as overly broad misconduct and social media policies. Apple denied wrongdoing, stating it respects employees' rights to discuss wages, hours, and working conditions. The case will be heard by an administrative judge in January if not settled. This is one of several labor disputes Apple faces, with at least two other pending NLRB cases and two U.S. Apple stores having unionized since 2022. And now to entertainment, where John Amos, best known for his roles in the 1977 miniseries, Roots, and Die Hard 2, has died at the age of 84. He died on 21 August of natural causes, according to a statement from his publicist Belinda Foster, but the news was only released on Tuesday. Amos also played James Evans Sr. on Good Times, which featured one of television's first black two-parent families. Among Amos' film credits were Let's Do It Again with Bill Cosby and Sidney Poitier, Coming to America with Eddie Murphy, and Die Hard 2. Over now to sports, where Arena Sabalenka continued her impressive winning streak, now at 15 matches, by defeating Madison Keys in straight sets to advance to the quarterfinals of the China Open. The world number 2, 26 years old, completed the match in just 65 minutes with a score of 6-4, 6-3. As the top seed, Sabalenka will face either Karolina Muchova from the Czech Republic or Spain's Cristina Busca in the next round in Beijing. Her last loss occurred on August 10 during the quarterfinals of the Canadian Open. The three Grand Slam champion has achieved victory in 46 out of her 57 singles matches in 2024. Sabalenka secured titles at both the Cincinnati Open and the US Open during her current unbeaten streak. If she continues her success in Beijing, she could apply pressure on world number 1 Iga Swiatek, who is absent from the China Open due to personal reasons. And now to football, where Arsenal forward Bukayo Saka believes that this is the year the Gunners will finally claim their first Premier League title in 21 years. Under Mikel Arteta, the team has finished as runners-up to Manchester City for the last 2 seasons, and they haven't lifted the trophy since Arsene Wenger's Invincibles in the 2003-2004 season. Currently, Arsenal sits third in the league, tied on points with second-place City and just 1 point behind leaders Liverpool after 6 matches. In addition to finishing second in the Premier League, Saka was part of the England squad that lost consecutive European Championship finals in 2021 and 2024. The 23-year-old remarked that those disappointments fueled his desires to victory this year, citing their recent 2-0 Champions League win over Paris Saint-Germain as evidence that they can compete against the top teams. And that's a wrap on today's World News on Voice of the People TV. Many thanks for watching. I am Jerry Apelion. Good evening.